So I think now it's 2 o'clock and we are ready to welcome you to today's webinar, how to reduce risk in product innovation. We're so glad to see all of you, and I know that Peter is exciting to get started, but before that I will just give you some practical information to give you the absolute best experiences with this webinar. My name is Kimla Linnemann and I'm the product lead at Syndicate U, and today I will be your host. Therefore, I will make sure that you are familiar with the tool. We will be using 3 functions here in Zoom today. First, we have the chat, where you're very welcome to just chat with each other and chat with me. Please use to all panelists and attendees if you want everyone to see what you're writing, and I will make sure to answer you. Furthermore, you can ask all the questions that you want during the webinar in the Q&A. I will make sure to nicely interrupt Peter through the webinar and ask your questions. So you just write it and I will ask it for you. At last, we have some polls that we will give you during the webinar, and you will just have to answer on the screen. This webinar will be recorded and you will get it in an email on Monday. I think that's everything you need to know. Otherwise, just ask me in the chat. I'll say hello to Peter, and please enjoy everyone and ask all the questions that you feel like.
Thank you, Camilla, and welcome all of you. And I'm very glad that you chose to listen in on this webinar in a topic that is it's very dear to me, and I think needs a lot more attention that it's currently getting. So the theme of this webinar is how to reduce risk in product innovation, with a big focus on experiments and how to use experiments to validate all of these assumptions and hypotheses that we have when we do product development, especially in digital product development. As Camilla was saying, please ask questions as we go along. I'll walk you through the agenda in a minute, but if anything comes up, it's okay for you to ask, and Camilla will interrupt me, and I'll answer as we go along, and we'll end with a Q&A session for those who have questions in the end as well. And of course, you're also welcome to contact us and me afterwards if you have anything you want to ask or something you are in doubt of. I'll be very happy to help you out. So for this webinar, it's maybe you have attended some of our other webinars. It's a bit different than some. Instead of using like a PowerPoint or a keynote presentation, I have an iPad here and a pen, and I prepared a little presentation for you. But I will be able to draw a little bit as we go along, to maybe highlight some of the key elements that I'd like to share with you. So first of all, this is the agenda for the webinar. I'll just briefly walk you through it. So first of all, just a little talk about why I want to give you this webinar and why I think it's important. So what is this webinar all about? Then just briefly, who am I, and why do I want to tell you about this? Just a little bit about product discovery. It's a term that is being used a lot at the moment, but for those who haven't been introduced to it, I'll just put some few words on it. And then last, in regard to context of this webinar, just a little bit about some of the canvases and models that I'll be referencing throughout the webinar. I won't spend too much time on that, but just to give you the context, well, basically to walk you through it. So I've chosen a few canvases and models, but it's not necessarily those that you would use in your own companies, but just to have something recognizable for all of you to throughout the webinar. And then what it's all about, exploration and exploitation of the products that we create, and using hypotheses and experiments in the way we work and how we develop products. So hopefully, most time will be spent on the last 2 points on the agenda. I'll try to keep the other stuff short, and hopefully we'll be able to have a lot of dialogues and questions as we go along. But just first off, just to get us started, I have a small poll just to get a little introduction to how experienced you are in working with experiments in your product development. So please, if you would answer, and then we can see how it is with the attendees of the webinar, and we could tailor it a bit as we go along.
Yes, and I can see that you're already doing that. I will just give everyone a chance to answer and then share the result with you, Peter. Okay, let me share the result.
Great, thank you. So first of all, great that that no one answered don't know, so we don't have to spend too much time on that. But I'll try to dive a little bit into it as we go along. And again, please ask questions. So what is this webinar all about? And why is this important? So the webinar is I wanted to give an introduction to hypothesis-driven product development. It's something that's being talked about, as I said, but not all understand what it is, and it's kind of to put context around the work with hypothesis and experiments. The second thing that I hope you get from this webinar is an awareness of why it's important to test your actual hypothesis. So when you have these assumptions about your products and all the needs of your clients and customers, why it's important to actually do experiment to get facts about them, to show you in the right direction with the products you develop. And last but not least, why few experiments rarely is enough. So what I see is that there's a focus on doing some, but not to follow up on the results that we get from the experiments that we do. So in my opinion, and what I hope that you get from this, is that you need a lot of experimentation, a lot of hypothesizing in order to be able to build the right product for your customers and your clients. And then last, so what does this all have to do with risk? So why did I put the risk in this in the title of this webinar? So I hope that you get a little indication of why you can mitigate and play down the risk of your product development by doing this. So just briefly, a little bit about who I am. So I'm a product developer here at Syndicate. I'm Danish, so English is not my native language. So if I fumble a bit in the words and sentences, please bear with me. But I am working currently a lot with product discovery with the clients that I work with. I have a background as a developer as well. I've been working as a developer for, I think, 15, 17 years as well. So I have the technical insight as well into building digital products, because I've been part of doing it myself. For the past 10, 12 years, I've been working with Agile, working with Scrum, both as team member and developer, but also as a Scrum Master or Agile coach for the company I've worked with. And with the Syndicate, I usually work as a consultant for the clients that I work with. I used to, I work as a coach, either product coach or Agile coach, but I also do training and do workshops. In regard to training, it has a lot of focus on Agile and Agile product development, product discovery. So you can find a lot about that on syndicateu.dk, our website for our courses and classes. And just I'll get a little bit back to it, but just a little insight. So we're coming up with a masterclass after summer, an online masterclass that dives a lot more into product management as a craft. So if you get inspired by some of the stuff that I say now and this webinar, maybe look into what we're coming up with. It'll be great. I'm working with the 2 other guys here at Syndicate to develop this masterclass for you guys. Yep, I think that's about me. and let's just move along. So product discovery. So for the past many years, when we have been building products and when we have been coding apps and applications, websites and such, there's been a lot of focus on building the stuff right. So a lot of focus on Scrum, on Agile, on teams, and collaboration, and handling dependencies and impediments, and all that kind of stuff. And we have somewhat succeeded in that. It's still very difficult for a lot of companies, but one of the reasons for that, I think, is that there has been too little attention on the actual what to build and why to do it. So what are the what can you see? What are the needs of the users, of the customers? So what are they actually willing to pay for, and what do they want to use, and how do we help them in their daily works and their daily tasks? And I think that there has been too little attention on that. It's getting better, and a lot of companies and a lot of people is currently talking about product discovery. But to me, product discovery is just simply what to build. So the what in product discovery, and the how talking about product delivery when we have developers actually doing the application, building the applications. So I have this this illustration here. So what it tries to show is that we basically start with some sort of an idea, and we want to deliver some sort of a product, and we want to provide some benefit for our end users. But product discovery is the road to figuring out what to build, and that road can be, there can be a lot of missteps, a lot of learnings, a lot of can you say, trying things and figuring out how to actually how can you put it, figure out what the actual needs are of our customers, of the users of our products. So what this tries to illustrate is that you'll sometimes be led a bit astray, and you'll have to try out. Sometimes you'll go a bit backwards on what your product is, until you find some sort of stable and confidence in what you are to build. I'll get a little bit more into this this way of representing it when we go into the explore and exploit talk. Product discovery is being used by a lot of different people, writing a lot of books, smart people who've kind of come up with this term. But I just want to highlight a few of what lies behind all of this. So historically, we've been working with say, like, waterfall approaches to building products. And actually, maybe 20 years ago, we had people thinking into, so how can we build better products? How can we understand our products better? So a lot of the literature and the talk we have right now about product discovery is based on some work done by some very smart people way back, maybe 20 years ago. So we have, for instance, Steve Blank, who came up with the concept of customer development, and looking into the customers and their needs, and trying to put focus on actually having a problem solution fit. So do we actually do we provide a solution for an actual problem when we build our products? Started using concepts such as MVPs, funnels, in order to get to the right product. Then we had also, like back in the 90s, design thinking arose. It has gotten a bit of a comeback the late years. It's kind of the same thing. So understand your customers, ideate, define what you want to build, prototype it, test it, and learn from that. And latest, some years ago, a guy called Eric Ries wrote a book called The Lean Startup, very much based on the work done by Steve Blank, where he came up with this build, measure, learn loop. But this is basically what I will be addressing today. So how do we do this, and why do we do this? So the notion of learning by setting up measures and building test experiments or MVPs to actually validate it and learn from it. So this is much about what I'll be saying about of product discovery generally, but just to give you a little insight into, so this is something that have been brewing for many years now, but is resurfacing and is being accepted by leadership also in the companies that we work in. Okay, so just before we move along, just and talk about the canvases we'll be using. So just to get a little bit of insight, there'll be a small poll on the use of canvases in your organizations. And again, please ask questions as we go along.
Yes, and I can see that you're already answering. Interesting to see how experienced you are regarding this area. I think I will share the result with you right now, Peter. Here you go.
Thank you. Okay, so that's actually it's fairly even divided. So some use it a lot, a few sometimes, and there's a little overweight into to not using it and not knowing basically what it is. So just briefly, I'll introduce what I'll be using in this webinar before we move along. So so the canvases that I'll be using in this webinar is more or less based on some work done by a company called Strategizer and a guy called Alex Osterwalder, who wrote this book a long time ago called Business Model Generation. They've written a lot of books since then. So currently we have these 4 books about how to generate your business model. So how to find out what products you should build and how to figure out how these fit in the market and how they address the needs of the customers. So I'll be touching a bit about it and using some of them as we go along. I'll just want to dive into, so this one here, the business model canvas. So you guys that have been using canvases a lot or just a little will probably know this, but just to tell you basically what this is. So this is a way to, instead of writing big business plans, basically you can use this as a way of figuring out what your product should be and what your needs are, what the customer's needs are, and how to approach it. But in this case where we're talking about hypotheses and experiments, so the main reason I'm bringing this in is we have these different segments of this canvas. So the canvas being this so how many are we? So we have these 10 fields here. So we have customer segments. So who are our actual customers? In which channels are we reaching them with our products? What is our relationship to them? And what is the value propositions that we're proposing to them? One of the other canvases is the value proposition canvas, which dives a bit more into this, where they set up a structure for how to figure out what the customer's needs are and how to address them, what pains they have and what gains they'll get from our products. But that basically comes into this area. But the important part of this is that there's more to it than just talking to customers and getting their feedback and observing how they work in order to validate if we should actually build the products that we do. Because it also has something to do with, do we have the right resources to build this? What activities do we need to do to actually come out with this product? And do we have any partnerships that we need to attend to as well? Which also ties into a cost structure of the business we're trying to build, and the revenue streams that we hope that we'll get from. So the reason I want to bring this into this discussion is that basically all that we fill into a canvas like this is from the get-go also hypotheses, and these need to be tested as well. So when we talk about hypotheses and experiments, it's not just about graphical interface or the flow of a user and how they use our product, but we also need to validate these other areas to make sure that it actually makes sense, that it's viable to build the product, and that we can actually do it. So this is the value proposition canvas that I was talking about. I won't dive into that one. And the last one I just want to touch upon is this third book that is rather new, called Testing Business Ideas. The reason I want to bring that up is that it's a very good introduction, also for you guys, if you want to dive a little bit more into this experimentation and MVP side of product discovery. It's a gold mine of different ways to test your product and how to string them up and put them in sequence to get a better confidence in the hypothesis that you have set up. I won't spend more time on it than that, but just to let you know that when I'm referencing the business model canvas later on, this is the reason for me to do so. All right, so the last thing I want to cover before diving all the way into the experimentation is portfolio management, because it has a lot to do with how we work, and the companies we work in, well, at least most of us do, tend to use or address the issues we have with something maybe written in books about how startups do. So my point here is that we need to be able to separate the two using experimentation on existing products and new business models.
Yes, and I have just launched a poll for you, so please answer whether your company has a defined process for portfolio management. Okay. Peter, ready to see the result?
Yes, please.
Here you go.
Thank you. So this is not surprising. It's fairly even. So some do have them and some don't. And maybe the concept of portfolios for your products, the approach can be very different in regard to whether it's more project portfolio or if it's actually business models and approaches that you address. So back to, and I can see I maybe lost some screen sharing here. Do you still see the poll?
I do see your slides. The poll, yes.
Okay, so I'll just reset my sharing here. I don't know what happened. It froze somehow. Sorry about that. And it should be back. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so hopefully that won't happen again. So the notion of exploring versus exploiting, and in regard to this small drawing that I showed you earlier on. So there's a lot of literature in regard to this part. So this is the startup segment. So this is where you invent new stuff and where you explore new markets and such. But the actual thing is that a lot of us are working in more of an exploitation area. So we have existing applications, systems, businesses that we tend to, and we try to improve upon as we go along. But a lot of the tools that we can use are the same. But to me, it's important that we're aware of the different sides to it. So when starting entirely new innovation products, projects, etc., it's another game than working on existing solutions that we already have. So trying to visualize this, I took a diagram from one of the other books that I showed you, the one called Building Invincible Companies. So the point here is that we have two different areas. So we have the explore area here, where we have new business models, we have new products and services, we do innovation, and what we're looking into there. So when we are experimenting, the main purpose of that is to um, look into our business model and the business opportunities, so the revenue that we can generate, and try to work on how we can tailor that to the actual needs, and by and what can you say, make it possible to scale those products so that we can actually make money from them. The other axis we have here is the innovation risk. So this is where the experiments come into play also. So when we have business ideas, a lot of it is based on assumptions. Or maybe someone had a good idea, but how big is our confidence in those ideas? So how much proof do we have that they will actually work, before we build, before we scale, and before we can like push them up into what we would call the exploitation area of phase, to use a bit banned word. But if we look at this in phases, because typically when we have reached the market, and when we have our products in markets, it's a bit of another attention that we put on the products that we have. So then it's more about, so are we still providing our users and our customers with the benefits that kind of help them with their needs and the jobs that they need to have done? Is there other products that might disrupt us? So we work on a scale where we look into, so are we on a brink to maybe being put in the grave because other competitors, for instance, are building other products that move into our business area? So there we set up a hypothesis again in regard to how can we make this better? So how can we avoid being disrupted? How can we avoid having to kill our products? Maybe another on the other axis we have so the return, so the money we actually make from this. So this can be going downwards as well. So then we need to use these techniques in order to figure out, so how can we re-enter the market, or create new value within the market we're already in. So this is more or less to give you an indication that it's two different games basically that we play. We use some of the same tools, but it's important to be aware of this when working with these experiments and working with hypothesis. I try to indicate here, so on this way to scaling the product, as we get more confident in we're actually solving an actual problem that people will pay for. Another aspect of it is not to waste too much effort and too much money. So start small. So be aware of how much you need to pay, or how much time you need to spend on getting your assumptions validated. A general rule of thumb is to get the most amount of validation and knowledge for the less amount of money and time spent, basically. And as you get more confident, well, you can also scale up and spend more money on the experimentations that you do. So what I hear a lot, and one of the first things that clients say to me when I talk to them, is they ask me about something such as design sprints, for instance. And a design sprint, for those who don't know it, it's a way of validating or mitigating some of the risk you have in your product. So you have some questions in regard to in which way to go with your products. And you spend 5 full days with maybe 8 to 10 people trying to brainstorm and figure out what solutions to build and test them with actual customers. So this is a fairly expensive way of experimenting. So maybe you don't have to start with that. Maybe you can start with something else. So maybe you can start with custom interviews. So maybe you can observe some of your users. So if you're working in a big company and you're making products for your internal users, go sit with them, see how they work. That's much cheaper. Maybe you won't be as confident as if you build products and test them with them, but it'll give you an indication of if you're moving in the right direction. And to me, that's a very important thing to be aware of. Any questions? Or I'll move into the hypothesis and experimentation and how we work with that.
Yes, you can just do that, and please ask questions in the Q&As. If you have any, I will raise it to Peter.
Okay, I'll just move along, and otherwise just interrupt. So I think this is the last poll, just to give an indication on where I need to put the emphasis in the last part of the webinar.
Yes, there should be a poll right now that you can answer whether you currently use experiments to validate your product. Okay, let's see. Just let the last answer. Okay, Peter, I will share it with you now. Here you go.
Thank you. Oh, cool. Some are actually doing it all the time. I don't see that a lot. So good for you and your company, at least. Okay. So no one here has actually never do experimentation. I'm very, very happy to hear. So you'll probably get a little bit of stuff that you already know in the next section. Still hope to be able to put a little more knowledge into you. And there I lost the screen share again, I think.
I think you did.
I'll just reset it. Luckily, it doesn't take much time.
No.
So there we are. Okay, so this is probably something that you can recognize in regard to when we start building products and as we go along. So somebody gets a bright idea about either a product that they want to build, or they have heard from someone that there's a need that needs to be filled. So this goes for big corporations with building an internal system, but also, well, I can at least know from my own time as a developer the countless times that someone has approached me and said that I have this great idea for an app for the iPhone. What do you say? I'll tell you, and you build it, and we share. And basically, most of the products that we build kind of start from there, but also continues from there. So someone has a great idea, and maybe someone else, maybe a developer, maybe a product owner, know exactly what features to build to make this this product come alive. And unfortunately, in many places, we just start building it. And there's not a lot of thought putting into validating if that actually is true. So I've said this a couple of times, and just to phrase it for those in doubt. So when I talk about hypothesis, it's basically a guess about what needs to be true for the idea to work. And a good hypothesis, if we want to work with it, and in regard to experiments and testing them to validate them, well, they actually need to be testable. They should be as precise as possible. So it's better to say that we believe that customers in a certain age range, coming from a certain part of a country, having a certain profile, wants our product, than just saying we believe that women want this product, for instance. So the more precise we can get, the easier it is to validate it, and also the easier or the cheaper it is, the smaller efforts you can do to actually validate it. And for a hypothesis to be good as well, it should be phrased in a way that it's falsifiable, so that you can actually say that it's, when you have performed your experiment, that it's either true or false. So the reason I mentioned a bit about this earlier on, but the reason I have taken the business model canvas in here is that in order to make a product and make the right product and price it the right way, etc., we need to look at all parts of the business, all parts of, in this case, the business model canvas. So if we have an idea about who our customers is, we need to actually get in touch with those exact customers to validate that we are actually true about it. When we say that we have a certain kind of relationship to those customers, we need to look into that as well. We need to validate it, because if we have assumptions in these areas, in all the areas actually, and we're wrong about them, well, it can make or break the product. If we build a product for someone we thought needed it, but they didn't, we might as well just, in many cases at least, throw it in the trash, because we build it towards those. So my point here is that all areas, so customers and value proposition, revenue streams, and costs, etc., we need to, in order to be confident in the product that we build, we need to extract hypotheses from all these areas in order to be sure that we're building the right product and it actually makes sense to build it. So when we do that, I think I said it before as well, but if we look into these three parts of the canvas, so this area over here, we're looking into the feasibility of building the product. So can we actually build it? A lot of places, that's all we look into. So we look at a problem that we think is there. We think up a solution, and then we check if we can build it. So do we have the knowledge to build an app in this ecosystem? And if we have it, we just go along and start building it. But maybe we don't look into whether somebody actually wants it. And if the people we think wants it are the ones who actually wants it, because that has effect into how we market it and how we price it, etc. So the point here is that all of these areas we need to extract the hypothesis and extract them in a form where they actually fit this description, so that we can actually set up experiments for them. And when we do that, so a good exercise is to take a canvas like this one. There are other ones out there as well, but take a canvas like this one and make sure that you get hypotheses from all of the areas. Asking yourself the question, what's most important to know first in regard to validating that we should actually build this product and that it's viable for us, that we can actually make money from it or save money from it, depending on what the approach is. So when we have all of those hypotheses, we need to look into what's most important. And a way of doing that is to look into, first of all, the urgency. So how big is the risk of us failing if we don't validate this? So that can be in regard to, for instance, user segments, or this can be in regard to what can actually be built. So we might have a great idea for setting up a system with machine learning or artificial intelligence, but if we can't build it, we shouldn't start marketing it or start addressing users to figure out if they want it or not. So we need to figure out what in what order we need to test our hypothesis. On the other axis here, we have how much evidence do we actually have already. So the point here is that some things we have a pretty good feeling that's correct. So we have some hypotheses about about users or about a certain problem. And maybe, for instance, we have data, we have analytics data that's showing quite quite obviously that this is an issue. So maybe we should not look into it. So maybe even if it is urgent, but we have a lot of evidence for it, maybe we shouldn't spend the time building experiments and test them to gain the knowledge that we already have. So this is a thing to keep in mind when actually setting up these experiments, and setting the order of your hypotheses. So it's often within this area. So urgent issues that haven't got much evidence, those are the ones that you should be looking into first. And there's a lot of ways to do these experiments. I'll get a little bit more into it and how to set them up in order to make them make each other better, basically. But this is just to illustrate that. So this is from this book called Testing Business Ideas, and some cards I got from another masterclass I attended with those guys. But this is just a subset of all those different types of experiments that you can build to actually validate your hypotheses. So for instance, one of them, and actually kind of a strong one, takes something as crowdfunding. So you actually have people pay up money for something that you haven't built yet. Is a pretty good indication that you have a good business case and you have a good product that they actually have a need for. So this is to illustrate that there's a lot to pick from. It's not just user surveys or customer interviews or creating a mock-up and showing it to people and getting the feedback. There's a lot of different ways to address this.
Hey, maybe Peter, before you continue, I have a question regarding that. One of the participants are asking, I'm new in the product discovery area. Which canvas would be a good idea to start with?
So my approach would be to use depending on where you are, but if you're new to it, my idea would be to start with business model canvas. And the reason for that is it's very widespread, and there's a lot of blog posts and articles and videos on how to use it and how to get started with it. And you can buy the books, and they're very easy to use, very graphic and very explanatory. So something like the business model canvas, maybe looking into there's another one called the Lean UX canvas. Maybe dive into the book from the guy behind that one, a guy called Jeff Godelf, and someone called Josh Seiden, who kind of created this canvas from their experience as designers working with product development. So, but one of these two, I think I'd start with, mainly because of both because they're good. I like them, and you can dive more into them, and there's a lot of literature for it. So you can basically take these, at least the 3 first books I showed, read them from end to end, and start using it. So that will be my approach as a newcomer to it.
Thank you. I think I'll just mention we will put in links for all the books that you mentioned in the email that will come on Monday with the recorded version of this webinar. Thank you.
Right. Cool. Okay. So I touched a little bit about, so I lost my sharing again. And so this is getting a bit annoying. So sorry about that, guys. I have no idea why that is happening.
I can see that someone is asking for the cards that you just showed. As I remember it from a physical masterclass that you attended, right, with Strategizer?
Yes, it is. And I asked Alex Osterwalder if we could buy them somewhere, and they were considering them, but they actually just produced them for the masterclasses. So I have one set at home, and that's it. I tried to get more, but it wasn't possible. But I would look out for it. I really like them, and it's a good way to set up your experiments and see how they work together and have easy access to them. But it's basically, so the last part of the book testing business ideas have all these cards basically with that information on them. So you could create your own if you wanted to, but maybe contact them and see if we can put some pressure on. Yep. Okay, so I touched a little bit about this in regards to how confident we are in our experiments. So, and that's another thing you get from using these cards or these approaches from testing business ideas, is that they have tried to set up a system for how much confidence the experiments give. So there's a big difference when having, for instance, to do with your customers or your users in what they say and what they actually do. So you get a lot more confidence from observing them using your tools or how they work in their daily lives than from hearing what they have to say about it. And this a little bit ties into also this one. So is it a lab setting? So are you inviting people in to use or look into mockups, or are you working with them in their actual environment where they would usually use your stuff? How much is it just an opinion that people have, or how much fact is there in the information that you give? So I'm using people a lot as an example here, but it also goes for the other experiments as well. And in the end, so what's the investment from customers? So are they actually, like for instance in the crowdfunding example, so do they want to cough up the money when you ask them? So then it gives you a lot of confidence, because they're actually willing to get you the money or give you the money for this product, maybe even before you have built it. Another thing is that if they just say that, yeah, well, this I would like that, I'd love that, I'll buy it as soon as you provide it, they don't really have any investment in it. So it's free for anyone to say. So look into getting as much confidence as possible when you work with it. And then it also has something to do with the number of data points. So there's a difference between doing one test and repeating the same test with 10 people, for instance, or looking into different data points. So the more data you have, of course, at some level it will begin to even out, and you'll get the same responses that you've heard before, and then no need to do more. But it actually has a lot of it gives you a lot of insight that you're aware of these things. And as I said, I think what I see in different companies as I work with, there's a lot of this here, a lot of saying and opinion and low investments, and then we still build the stuff more or less based on hope. Yep. So it's something to consider. So how much does it cost? How much will you actually put into it, and how much time do you have to spend to get this validation? So this also ties into how you should prioritize your experiments. So can you get a quick feedback and quick validation that maybe isn't bring you as much confidence, but you can get it quicker? Maybe it's worth to consider doing the cheap fast one to get a little bit more confident, but not as much, instead of spending a lot of money and a lot of time on something else. Again, a design sprint is a very good example of that. Okay, so we're nearing the end, I think. I'll try to maybe speed it up a bit to make sure we keep the time. But the way I would address it, and the way I would suggest you to do it, is to line up your hypotheses. So get those prioritized and stacked, and address them from the top. And then see, so in order for validating this hypothesis, which experiments would I have to do in which order to get that validation? And from that, make a decision on, so it's, for instance, do you want to pivot into another direction? Should your product be something else? Can you you disregard the hypothesis? Can you say that it was false and then move along from that? Maybe that will give you some new ideas and set up some new hypotheses for it. In some cases, you will maybe just say that, okay, so the action here is to just kill this product. We figured out that what we thought was possible, feasibility wise, wasn't possible. So just put it in the grave and move along. Until you reach a point where you can say, I had this hypothesis. I checked all these experiments. We got the results that we needed, and in the end, we can say, okay, this hypothesis held true, and we can move on. We're a lot more confident in the product that we want to build now than we were before, because we actually have some facts on the table in regard to the assumptions that we had moving into it. Yep, I'll just skip this one. So this was the last slide, so to say. So my point here, just to wrap it up a bit, is to make sure not to test too little. So work a lot on becoming more confident and back up that confidence with as much facts as possible before putting a lot of effort and a lot of money into building the products that you have thought up or that someone else have thought up for you. So this can be used as a way also to push back a little bit on maybe if it's management coming up with ideas or someone from the business side of your company, that they have ideas. Well, make them prove it to some extent before you move into it. So help the other parts of your organization thinking like this and thinking in the ways of hypothesis instead of gut feelings and moving on from that. Yeah, so we have a couple of minutes left, and just before we move into more questions. So what I hope that you got from this webinar. So it was kind of it was brief. It's not a lot that you can tell in an hour. But I hope you got an introduction to this way of doing product development and managing your products as well. And hope that you get from it that you can see the value of thinking in hypotheses and thinking in experiments when building products, and having more emphasis on getting facts in regard to all of these assumptions that pretty much are on the base of experiments. And you can use this both for big innovation initiatives or new products, but also in the daily lives of the products you have already in the hands of your users when small adjustments or big adjustments are made to them. So when someone gets an idea, you hear from a customer that they need a given feature and even or a new approach to the solutions that you have. Make sure that you get as much facts on the table as possible. And to do that, I hope that you get from it that you can't get that confidence with just a few experiments. It's rarely enough. Sometimes it is. Maybe you have a lot of data, a lot of confidence already, and then that's okay. Don't make this a catch-all that you have to test everything, but have a focus on that there is a risk to building products and whether they're digital or they're physical products. There's a risk to doing it in regard to effort and investment. So try to mitigate that risk and lower that risk by having an approach like this and doing a lot of experimentation. Yeah. So just as the last thing here, and just before we go into to last questions, as I mentioned, so we are doing this product management masterclass. It's an online class that will start up after summer in August. I'm doing it with these guys, Christian and Martin, both very skilled guys in design and in working with the products on a more leadership level. So just to let you know that it's there if you want to maybe dive a little bit more into it. We can also help you, of course, in other ways as well, either by consulting or education and such. But have a look at it and see what it's all about, and maybe getting a bit more hands dirty in regard to working with product management, and also in regard to working with experiments like what's the topic of this webinar. So have a look. I think you'll provide some links, Camilla, as we end this webinar.
Yeah. Yes,
but it'll
actually,
be great, I promise.
I have just shared the link with you guys in the chat, and also if you would like to sign up, we are very glad that you're here with us in this webinar. So I have just shared with you a little discount where you can get 20% off on the product management masterclass. But before we end, we have a really, really interesting question that I know that you know something about, Peter. Someone is writing, I work in an enterprise where we use Scrum. How do product discovery fit in? And I know that you have had this question before, so yeah. I think it's very important that we come around this area before we end.
Yeah, so actually I think it fits very well into Scrum, and Scrum is a framework, so it's also what you put into it that actually matters. So it's actually a very simple framework to work in. But so how does this fit in? So when doing an experiment like the ones I address here, so I would consider an experiment on the same level as I would consider any other product backlog item on a backlog. So it's something that can be built. Maybe it's something that developers can build. Maybe it's something that a designer or a UX person, something like that, can build. But someone from the team can definitely help in building these experiments, and it should be to me at least considered on an equal level to building end product, because it's actually validating that end product. And so in regard to this duel that I showed earlier on, so like this one here, right? So if we, and you can't see that, I can see that I drew. Never mind. But the duel I showed in regard to product discovery, and in the exploit and explore duel, so there will be, in the beginning of a product, there will be maybe an overweight in regard to discovery tasks, discovery PBIs. So where you build your experiments to validate the hypothesis you have, and the outcome of those may be new product backlog items that need to be developed, for instance. So try to think of it as just another thing that needs to be built, basically, and order it on your backlog as you would anything else, and make sure that it's not just something for UXers and product owners or designers. Developers can also gain a lot of insights from doing this, and build better products from it. But it's actually very possible. I think all teams should have that approach and bringing it in on the same level as other backlog items in a Scrum team.
Thank you very much, Peter. I know that a lot of guys are running for new meetings, so I think we will just round up. But thank you very much. I hope that all of you got some new inspiration thoughts out of this webinar. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we have recorded it, and you will get it in an email together with the links for all the books that you mentioned on Monday. Before you leave, we would be very glad that you leave us a little bit of feedback in our last poll. So please just check it out before you leave, and I hope to see you soon again. Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
Yep, thanks for listening in. I hope you got something from it. And feel free to reach out. You can find me either on our Syndicate webpage or LinkedIn, etc.